I'm going to share a reflection now that, as usual, I have on my phone. So I recently came across the following idea from a book. I haven't actually read the book, but from the book, A World Full of Gods by John Michael Greer. You may be familiar with the Mount Analog metaphor. There are many paths up the mountain, but they all lead to the same peak. Greer suggests a different image for polytheists, a village in a valley surrounded by various mountains to climb. Each peak is different and offers unique views back on the village. In the same way, you can explore various different relationships with deities, getting ever stronger as you ascend their mountain. And when you feel you have gone as far as you need to go up one mountain, you are free to return to the village and even to climb another. Ultimately, each different path adds perspective on the whole. There are many mountains, but all are part of the same world. I love this image of getting perspectives on my life from various traditions. I used to feel self-doubt about not committing to one particular path, partly due to negative messaging I'd encountered about dabbling in different traditions. Somewhere along my way, I came across this metaphor about shovels and holes, that switching between religious or spiritual paths was like picking up a new shovel and starting to dig a new hole each time, and you never get very deep. But I now see this metaphor as very flawed because, one, you can dig the same hole with different shovels, and two, why am I digging a hole anyway? I find a lot more joy and liberation in the image of walking on my own path that overlaps with others, but is also beautifully unique. I've spent some of the last couple years of my life viewing the world and spirituality from the UU mountain. What I most appreciate about this mountain is the deep regard for pluralism, that we don't need to all think or be the same, especially about theology, and that this actually enriches us. I've gained many perspectives that I value from other paths I've walked on. I was a Christian growing up, and the Jesus I knew, who I still have occasional chats with, was incredibly kind. Eastern traditions have affirmed the importance of balance as in yin and yang and the power of presence through mindfulness. I spent time with Quakers in my early 20s, where we practiced silence and openness to the idea that any person can deliver a sermon. I'm also a pagan and a pantheist. I take this Quaker practice and I experience the world as giving sermons all the time, in the calls of birds, the flowing of creeks, the rising of the sun. I connect with the Christian idea that we are all God's children and view it through my pagan lens. We're all Gaia's children. We're all the fruiting bodies of the earth, like mushrooms popping up in the soil. I learned from the Reclaiming Witches that I am my own spiritual authority. If I have a vision of a deity asking or telling me to do something, I can say no. This is what the existentialists were saying too. I'm always responsible for my actions, even if I believe they are divinely guided. I get to choose to act on that perceived divine guidance or not, and I make the call about whether to interpret something as divine guidance. I've been enriched by walking many paths and learning wisdom from many traditions. I appreciate this UU community of seekers who share our unique journeys with one another.
In 2020, my ex-husband and I moved from Virginia to the little town of Mineral on the south side of Lassen Volcanic National Park so that he could take a job as an IT specialist. It was before much internet. From what we could gather, in the peaks there would be 30-foot drifts of snow, and in Red Bluff it would get up to 115. So I thought somewhere between there we would find a nice town to settle in. Instead, we ended up in Mineral, which isn't 30-foot peaks of snow, but it's a little town of 90 people, an hour's drive from a grocery store, and they have to shovel out the the stop signs sometimes so you can see them because the snow is above the stop sign. And so it was an interesting new life. And we were able to drive through the park once because we moved there in early November. And then a week later, the road through the park was closed because they've learned not to fight Mother Nature. It doesn't make sense to plow that road through the winter. But when spring comes, it's a mad dash to get it open. And each superintendent of the park likes to, it's bragging rights if you can get that road open. So I'm going to say men, not to be sexist, but at that time they were all men. Maintenance men in big plows would start to plow the snow and open the road. And shortly after this, they started using GPS. But at that time, it wasn't yet feasible. So they couldn't always see where the road was. They couldn't always find their way. And I've been told by a big burly maintenance man that more than once they missed. And if you've driven through that park, it's scary in a car. Like you look down the sides and there's steep, sheer cliffs. And so when they missed, they rode the plow down the cliff. And I was told if anyone said their underwear were still clean and dry, they were a liar. But I was told that by a maintenance man. So you can imagine it was a little rougher the way it was explained. But you get my point. But that fascinated me, kind of this change to GPS, and then we have Google Maps, but that we can't get lost in the world in the same way we could. And at that time, I just imagined you couldn't get lost. Now with Google Maps, I know you can, but not in the same way. That like there's not these vast uncharted territories. You generally know pretty much where you are and you can find the road. But something has always intrigued me about that idea that you could totally be lost, that you could totally not be able to see the road you're on. And I think we've gained something for sure. I'm a big advocate of science and knowledge, as you know, but there is something lost with that. But it occurs to me in our spiritual life, in our personal lives, we get so lost and off track in so many ways, And I'm going to tell you about a time I felt very lost. So when I was in seminary, I needed to do an internship as a chaplain. And I lived up in Mineral, so there was no place that close. And I had a 3-month-old boy. So I decided to go back to Virginia, where my mother-in-law was very excited to help me take care of my son for about 8 to 10 weeks. I can't remember now. And I started a chaplainship at the local hospital and a local independent living, assisted living, and memory care. And I was excited. I was like, I will be a great chaplain for those people that need a more liberal chaplain, and I will find these people. Wrong. That was so wrong. I did find one man. He gave me this little finger to come closer, and he said, "I'll tell you a secret." He said, "I don't believe in God." And I said, "I'll tell you a secret. I'm not sure I do either." But by and large, people that would want to speak to a chaplain in that area were fundamentalist Christians. And throughout the process, I found out that I could be of great service to them. And I was very proud of that. But then I started thinking, what am I doing here? This is not what I envisioned. I didn't envision that I was going to be a chaplain for fundamentalist Christians. That is not my vision of who I would ever become. And I was really grappling with that when I was in a bookstore. And I went to the religion section and I looked, and it looked like all the books it said religion, but I think they should have just torn that off and put Christian there, fundamentalist Christian at that. But then I only picked up one book, and for some reason I saw this spine sticking out, and it says, Finding Your Religion. So I pulled it out, and it's written by Reverend Scotty McLeland, and it doesn't say this, but on the front it shows a drawing of him, and he's the inspiration, he and one other man are the inspiration for the Campus Crusader in the Doonesbury comic strip, Calvin and Hobbes. And so, or maybe that's wrong, the Doonesbury. So I was like, that's interesting. And I read the back, and I decided to take it home. He's the Dean of Religious Life at Stanford and a chaplain at Tufts University. Well, that's interesting. And I start reading it. He's a Unitarian Universalist. He's a Unitarian Universalist. I was just shocked. And when I told the students that the other chaplain students, like 6 Mennonites and a Presbyterian, they said, do you think your prayer was answered? And I thought on that. And I said, it felt like my prayer was answered. And that's all I would say. So this gave me a great guide, and I think it's a great resource. So he does talk about the mountain metaphor, that we're all on different paths and you get to the same place. And I love Megan's metaphor too. And I don't think we can have too many metaphors, quite honestly. But I think of that place as enlightenment, or being your best self, or connecting with the interconnectedness of life. So I think pagans can climb a mountain too, personally. But I'm not going to argue, because I like all of us, we have many paths, we have many ideas, we can use many metaphors, and I think we can have more than one, or one might be important at one point in our life, and one might be more meaningful in another. So Reverend Scotty talks about there's 7 parts of your spiritual path: opening, thinking, experiencing, walking, joining, crossing, sitting, suffering, and rejoicing. So in the opening, you just have to get started on a path. And for many, that can be the hardest part. And for me, it was. I was like, I will never be religious. There's no religion that fits me. Like I really am attracted by some elements of Buddhism, but I don't think I'm a Buddhist. I'm really attracted to some elements of Judaism and Quakerism, but I'm not a Jew or a Quaker. So where does that leave me? But he says, don't worry about that so much. Just start walking. If you don't know, just pick one. Pick a path and just try it out. So perhaps if you were raised in a bad form of Christianity, you would want to delve into a more liberal, open type of Christianity that puts the love of Jesus at the center of it. Or perhaps you'd want to just try something totally different, like Buddhism. It doesn't matter. Pick a path, because every path has been shown to help people that choose love and truth to become more enlightened. Next is thinking. He asks us to open up our mind again. Like, I know when I was a kid, I thought a lot more about these like big questions, like, is there a God? or isn't there a God, or what's the meaning of life, or what does this really mean? So engage your brain in this path, and that's very like we want to search for truth and meaning, and any path should agree with what we see before us, and be connected to the world. Experiencing a spiritual path, when you're on that path, it's just like you're out hiking in a mountain. And when you're out hiking, you feel the air and you start to notice more sounds around you, the sounds of the birds or the wind flowing through the trees or the leaves crunching under your feet. And so that experience of being connected and being present is part of the journey. And as we talk about these 7 parts, they don't necessarily happen in order. Or you might start with one, go back, and then focus on another. They're not necessarily in any order. Walking, that is like you're moving forward on that path. So you're becoming a part of that tradition or process, and you're living that life that Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam tells you is the right path, and you're accepting those ideas and trying to incorporate them in your life. And then joining. So as Unitarian Universalists, we're often overly proud of our individual ways. Like I am autonomous, I know what I think, I can reject ideas, I can find my own path. But we also need to acknowledge that, and obviously we have, because we're here today, so we know there's some value in coming together and sharing our ideas and sharing our enthusiasm and sharing our doubts and sharing our missteps with each other, and hearing what's worked for each other or not worked from each other, or what are we excited about or interested in learning. So he hopes that you would join a church or a synagogue or a temple on your path and have a spiritual community like this one here. Crossing. So when you're headed up that mountain, paths will cross many times. And this is a beautiful thing, because when you are one religion and you hear about someone of another religion, their rituals, their experience, it can inform you and change you. Like you might say, wow, I need to incorporate that. Or it might just make your understanding of your own practices deeper and more meaningful to learn from another. So crossing and learning is very important. Next, we have sitting, and that's the practice of prayer and meditation, or other practices. And we've talked about this a lot. And my most important practice in my life is mindfulness. And when I learned about mindfulness in seminary, we were told not to worry about the results, just do it. Just be in the moment, whether it's meditating, whether it's being in tuned and in the moment with your surroundings, and that you would see, you would want to keep doing it. But there are so many medical studies now that talk about the importance of mindfulness. It is so vital to our health. It can reduce pain, high blood pressure, anxiety, and a number of conditions. And depression, yeah, it just, the benefits are staggering. Suffering. So suffering is a real key time in the spiritual journey, as some people, when they suffer, they lose their faith. Their faith cannot weather that storm. They're like, I can't believe in God anymore because God would never do this. This is cruel, or I don't want this God. But at the same time, when people suffer, they're often drawn to a spiritual tradition, and the rituals, the prayer, the meditation, the leaving flowers on the grave, the rites of passage, the spiritual community can see them through hard times. And I didn't say a joy, but I now have a daughter-in-law, and she was talking about a church that she went to that everyone was like so perfect. Like they were almost like it felt like everyone was on display, that you went to church and you were pious and you were perfect. And I think that's one thing that's special about our community is I do know so many stories from so many people of like the pain they've gone through, the mistakes they've made. I know people know of painful times that I've gone through. And I just think that's a beautiful thing about our community is like, I don't feel like I have to show up and be perfect. I think y'all all know that I screw up a bunch, and you like me anyway, and I like you too. So we're good. And then the best part is rejoicing. And that's an important part of our spiritual community is when we come together, on Sunday, and we share our joys, and Christmas or winter solstice, or I think coffee hour is one of our rejoicing times. But we celebrate together as a spiritual community, and that's a beautiful part of the journey. So in this book, I found a lot of wisdom. But the part I like most is just start the journey. And it's not like digging a hole. Like he says part of it is not just the peak, it's the joy of the journey. Like when you're on a journey, you're already experiencing life differently, you're experiencing better, you're meeting people from different faiths along the trail, and you're having a beautiful time. So I think sometimes we get into life, I know I do, and I'm just like showing up. And this has made me think about like, what do I want to focus on moving forward in my spiritual path? And I invite you to ask yourself that too. So no hole digging. Just let's have a beautiful time together, climbing the mountain and crossing paths. Amen.